Yeah, it's completely connected to the ideas that I was describing, encountering when I was a student at Columbia, or that Yeonmi Park described to you. It turns out that there was an idea until extremely recently that was shared by conservatives and liberals in your generation, I would say, that what happens on campus stays on campus. The Oberlin gender studies major will make her way into the universe and she'll get her job at McKinsey and she's going to leave those silly ideas behind. No, no, that is not what's happened. It turns out ideas really, really matter. Ideas are extremely serious. And if you're marinating at the most important formative years of your life in basically an echo chamber of this ideology, and then all of a sudden you're going into these institutions, incredibly important institutions that are our newspapers, our publishing houses, our Hollywood, like go down the line. It's not like you're checking those ideas at the door, you're bringing them with you. And what we've seen is that you don't actually need a majority of people inside an institution to agree with these ideas for these ideas to gain these ideas to gain force.
No, you need a tiny minority.
A tiny minority, and you need cowardice at the top. Cowardice at the top. That is the key ingredient. You need people at the top who are willing to sell out the authority of the institution and the values of the institution that have taken decades, sometimes centuries to accrue, basically for the short-term benefit of not being called a bad name.
Okay, so let's delve into that a little bit. Okay, because that's actually pretty bloody awful, as it turns out. I mean, we don't want to... Look, here's what I've learned in the last 5 years. One thing I've learned is that most people will shut up very rapidly and apologize when attacked, and a very small minority won't.
Why is that?
Well, because it's so horrible to be attacked. And not only that, because it's so horrible to be attacked, but also because if you're a sensible person and you get attacked, the right thing to think to begin with is maybe you're stupid and wrong. Yes, exactly.
Of course.
Exactly.
It's natural.
Well, it's not only natural, it's even it's beneficial, right? I mean, because you want to be reactive to your social surround. And so then the question becomes, well, the first question is, why stick your neck out at all when the cost of sticking your neck out is like extraordinarily high, psychologically and practically, which it's certain, even if you stick your neck out accidentally, which because it's
never, I guess, because there are things that are, and I don't know how to say this without sounding cheesy, but like there are virtues that are so much more important than getting ratioed on Twitter. There just are. There are, again, without sounding too like high-minded, if you can get in touch with things that you're willing to risk your life for, or let's say risk your reputation for, it's only then will you be able to withstand the pain of the lies and the slander.
Okay, so what you gave up your job at the New York Times. I'm going to return to this point you just made. I want to run through the biography again. Now, you're working at the New York Times. You're not the world's most popular person there.
No.
So you're paying a price. Now, you can obviously tolerate that. You're constitutionally built so that you can tolerate that.
I think that I'm not an expert in this subject, but I think that I would qualify as highly disagreeable.
Yes,
according to your definition. Although it's hard for me to say that because I really care what other people think about me.
Yeah, well, you might be high, and you should take my personality test and find out, because I suspect you're low in politeness and high in compassion. Okay, that splits agreeableness, because then you would care for other people, but you'd still be willing to say what you have to say. I suspect and I also suspect you're probably pretty high in conscientiousness and openness, and that makes you a weird political animal, because openness tilts you in a liberal direction, but conscientiousness tilts you in a conservative direction. But it'd be worth taking the test to find out.
I'll take it. I've never taken it. In general, I've never take personality test. I don't know what my Myers-Briggs is either, but I will take it. I guess it's a longer conversation, but the question of how to incentivize, like, I'm obsessed with the idea of courage and what makes people courageous, or what makes people willing to be Natan Sharansky or be Andrei Sakharov. Like, what is it
I think it's fear of God.
Yeah.
You know, they say that's the beginning of wisdom. Well, I mean that I mean that genuinely, but also metaphorically. A lot of courage, I think, is being afraid of the right thing. Like, I don't think it was courage that drove me to do what I did 5 years ago in Canada. I think it was fear of what was coming as an alternative. I could see it. It was like, well, there's a little beast here that I could tackle, or there's a great huge beast that's lumbering forward in the distance.
But why are so many people deluding themselves into thinking that if they just like keep quiet about any number of the issues we're talking about, that it will somehow get easier to speak out later? Like, this is going to be the easiest time right now.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't know what the conditions are for learning that. You see, that's one thing. I think I've sort of known that for a long, long time, that the time to have the fight is now.
For me, I think being deeply connected to Jewish history and feeling like it's not just history, but it's like a compass in my life, and that I am deeply obligated to its lessons and deeply obligated to all of the people who suffered and sacrificed so that I can live in the freedom and the privilege that I have. Like, that's my anchoring thing. And I'm interested in, how do we incentivize more people to see what this is and to sort of come out of the closet? Because the thing that is like so fascinating to me about this strange phenomenon is, like, by any measure, we're living in the freest societies that human beings have ever known.
And they're rapidly improving.
Yes, and that people are acting as if, and for very understandable reasons, like we're living in a totalitarian society to some degree, meaning they are double thinking. They are living lives in which they have a private persona, and they will tell me in private at dinner, totally agree with you, but I could never say it out loud. Like, that phenomenon to me is so unbelievably widespread. And
yeah, well, that's the state. Well, that is the indication of the dawning of the totalitarian state, because the totalitarian state depends entirely on the dissociation between the public persona and the private viewpoint. And to the degree that each person is willing to swallow that lie, that's their contribution to the totalitarian state. And so it is a requirement. It's interesting that you pose your moral obligation in terms of your responsibility to, at least in part, to Jewish history. Well, and the fact that so many times people didn't say what they needed to say, and the consequences were absolutely catastrophic. I mean, that's certainly the case in Nazi Germany, to say the least. But it also characterized the Stalinists and the Maoists and all of those totalitarian states. I mean, if people need to realize that if they're in a position where they can't say what they think, that's the evidence that we're sliding in a direction that's not good. There's the evidence. It's right there. And what do you do about that? Well, you say what you think carefully. And the reason for that is the alternative is worse. That's the...
I also think that it was really hard for me to give up the prestige of working.
God, I bet. Times. I want to hear about that.
It was really hard for me. But I think that, like, putting myself, like, the fact that I had already put myself on the hook so publicly for standing up for certain values made it impossible for me not to follow through with doing the right thing. It's a little bit like when I wanted to run the marathon, like, I insanely, because I can't run a half a mile right now, but years ago I ran the New York City Marathon, having never been a runner in my life. And the way that I did that was I told everyone in my life I'm running the marathon before I'd even run a step. And the pressure to sort of follow through with what I had publicly stated was very good, because it forced me to do it. And I guess what I would say to
Nietzsche said every great man is the actor of his own ideal.
Well, yeah, I guess what I would say to people listening to this is, like, put yourself on the hook now in front of people that you respect and admire, and maybe even do it in a public way, because then when the testing time comes, it's very embarrassing not to follow through with living by your ideals.
Well, and let's say, well, the testing time isn't going to come and we're just overstating the danger. Because that's the rationale, right? That's the rationale. That? Well,
do you think we're overstating it?
We could talk about France.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know, right? Because who knows, right? I don't know which way history is going to turn. It doesn't look very. I'm certainly not happy with what's happening in the universities. I'm not happy with what's happening in the scientific journals. It doesn't seem to me a great thing that diversity, inclusivity, and equity is popping up absolutely everywhere, that human resources departments have a stranglehold on corporations.
All I'm saying is that if we're living in a world in which people cannot say their commonsensical views out loud, okay? I'm not talking about political views. I'm talking about, are there differences between men and women? Is America fundamentally a good place? Is Lincoln a hero? Like, these are basic things that have become taboo. If we cannot say those basic things out loud, and if those ideas about the fundamental goodness, let's say, of the American project, but really of the Western project, have become...
Really, I would say more than that. I would say of humanity itself, because this is a fundamental critique. The idea that our social institutions are predicated on exploitative power, that's a critique of the human spirit.
Sure.
It goes past even the West.
Yeah, if you can't say that looting is bad, okay, to think about this summer, if you can't say that segregation is evil and wrong, if you can't say that, I mean, we all know what the things are, the things that have become unsayable. And I'm suggesting that that is enough for me to sound the alarm. And if it turns out that I was a little paranoid or hysterical, but I made these things more sayable in sounding the alarm, I'm okay with that. I'd rather be wrong now.